The phone rang at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of sharp electronic trill that cuts through every other sound in the world and leaves nothing but dread in its wake. David Thompson had his hands buried in the guts of an industrial air conditioning unit at the Harris estate, sweat running down the back of his neck despite the November chill, when the vibration started against his hip. He didn't recognize the number, but he recognized the area code. Emma's school. He yanked the phone free, smearing grease across the screen. The nurse's voice came through tight and controlled, the kind of calm that meant someone was holding back panic by sheer force of will. "Mr. Thompson, Emma had an episode during afternoon recess. Her heart monitor went off. The paramedics are with her now, but you need to get to County General as soon as possible." The wrench slipped from David's other hand and hit concrete with a sound like a gunshot. His daughter's name formed on his lips, but no sound came out. The nurse was still talking, something about stable condition and precautionary measures, but David's legs were already moving. He ran. The estate grounds blurred past. Manicured hedges, stone pathways, the fountain that cost more than his annual salary. His truck sat in the service lot, 12 years old and burning oil, but it started on the first turn, and that was all that mattered. He was on the highway doing 90 before he even thought to check the rearview mirror. The steering wheel felt slick under his palms. Emma's heart murmur had been stable for 2 years, the cardiologist monitoring it every 6 months with the kind of cautious optimism that never quite convinced David to stop worrying. Congenital defect, present since birth, manageable with medication and monitoring. Those were the words doctors used. Manageable. As if a structural flaw in his 6-year-old daughter's heart was something you could manage the way you managed a budget or a schedule. Traffic thickened as he hit the city limits. David cut across 2 lanes, earned a horn blast from a sedan, didn't care. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Red light ahead. He ran it. The hospital parking garage loomed gray and massive. David abandoned his truck in a loading zone and sprinted toward the emergency entrance. Automatic doors parted. Fluorescent light washed everything in sick yellow. The intake desk stretched ahead like a barricade between him and his daughter. A woman in scrubs looked up. "Can I help you?" "Emma Thompson, 6 years old, came in by ambulance. Heart episode at school." Her fingers moved across a keyboard. Each second of delay felt like glass under David's skin. "Room 7, through those doors, left hallway." David was moving before she finished. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and fear. Room 7 had a curtain pulled across the doorway. He shoved it aside. Emma lay in a bed that swallowed her small frame, wires trailing from electrodes on her chest to a monitor that beeped with mechanical regularity. Her eyes were open. That was the first mercy. The second was that she smiled when she saw him. "Hi, Daddy." David crossed to her in 3 strides and took her hand, gentle despite the adrenaline still screaming through his system. Her fingers felt too fragile, bird bones wrapped in skin. "Hey, baby, how are you feeling?" "Tired. My chest hurt before, but it doesn't now." A doctor appeared in the doorway, young woman with dark hair, pulled back, severe and tired eyes that had seen too many emergencies to waste time on false comfort. She introduced herself as Dr. Patel, pediatric cardiology. "Mr. Thompson, Emma's stable now. The episode was an arrhythmia, likely related to her existing murmur. We're running a full cardiac panel, echocardiogram, the works. I need to ask about her medication compliance. Every morning, 8 o'clock. I measure it myself. Never miss a dose." Dr. Patel nodded. "That's good. Sometimes these things progress regardless of management. We'll know more when the tests come back, probably 2 to 3 hours. She's safe here." Safe. David wanted to believe that word meant something. He thanked the doctor and turned back to Emma, who was studying the monitor with the kind of focused curiosity she brought to everything. His daughter had her mother's eyes, dark brown and sharp, missing nothing. 4 years since cancer took Sarah, and sometimes the resemblance still hit David like a physical blow. Emma yawned. "Can you stay?" "I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing evened into sleep. David sank into the chair beside the bed and finally let himself shake. His phone buzzed in his pocket. 3 missed calls, 2 from the estate office, 1 from a number he didn't recognize. A text message waited from Clara. the head housekeeper at Harris Estate. "Is everything all right?" Ms. Harris is asking. David stared at the screen. 7 hours ago he'd been elbow-deep in ductwork, just another Tuesday on the job. Now his daughter was hooked to machines in a hospital room, and the world had telescoped down to this single point of suspended terror. He typed back, "Emma in hospital. Testing now." The response came within seconds. "Tell us if you need anything." David pocketed the phone. The clock on the wall read 3:15. Time moved like something broken. The story of how David Thompson ended up working at the Harris Estate had started 7 hours earlier, but the real beginning stretched back almost 2 months. It had started the way these things always started, with something breaking at the worst possible time. At 7:30 that same morning, David had been in his apartment kitchen making pancakes from a box mix while Emma sat at the table drawing in her sketchbook. The apartment occupied the second floor of a converted house in a neighborhood that had been working class for 60 years and showed no signs of upward mobility. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, linoleum floors that had seen better decades. But the rent was manageable, and the landlord didn't ask questions when David needed to pay a week late, so it qualified as home. Emma's medication bottle sat on the counter, prescription label worn from daily handling. David measured out the precise dose, watched Emma swallow it with orange juice, same routine every morning for 2 years. She made a face. "Still tastes like metal." "I know, baby, but it keeps you healthy." She returned to her drawing, tongue poking out in concentration. David flipped pancakes and watched her work. Emma drew constantly, compulsively, filling notebooks with buildings and trees and people. The current sketch showed a tall structure, all vertical lines and sharp angles, with a tiny figure visible in one high window. The figure had no smile. "What's that one?" Emma didn't look up. "The castle lady. She lives in a big house, but she looks lonely." David slid pancakes onto a plate and set it in front of her. "Where'd you see a castle?" "It's not a real castle. It's just what I call it in my head." The phone had rung at 7:45, estate management calling with an edge of desperation in the professional voice. Security system failure, complete shutdown, crowd at the main gate, situation escalating. They needed him there immediately. David had been contracted for maintenance work at the Harris Estate for 6 weeks, basic electrical and systems repair, the kind of skilled labor that kept buildings functional without making headlines. The pay was decent. The hours were flexible enough to accommodate Emma's school schedule and doctor appointments, and the work itself was straightforward. Fix what's broken, don't break what's working, submit invoices on time. He'd dropped Emma at school by 8 o'clock, made it to the estate by 8:10. The scene at the front gate was worse than described. At least 30 people with cameras pressed against wrought iron bars, voices overlapping into white noise, several attempting to scale the stone perimeter wall. Security guards on the inside looked rattled, hands near weapons they clearly hoped not to use. Clara had met David at the service entrance, a woman in her 50s who ran the household staff with military precision and perpetual exhaustion. She'd led him to the control room where monitors displayed static, and a younger security tech stood frozen in front of a console, like he was afraid touching it would make things worse. "Contracted firm says 3 days minimum, $15,000, Clara said. "Can you do better?" David set his toolbox down and opened the main electrical panel. The problem revealed itself in under a minute. Failed relay, poorly installed, buried behind components that shouldn't have been there. He traced the power line, found the tripped breaker, reset it, bypassed the faulty relay. The monitors flickered and returned to life, camera feeds populating screens in sequence. The gate controls blinked green. Clara exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since the system failed. "You're a miracle worker. Just someone who can read a wiring diagram, but you're going to need a complete overhaul. This setup's a disaster waiting to repeat." The younger guard was already radioing the front gate to close it, push back the crowd. Through the monitors, David watched the iron bars swing shut with smooth mechanical precision. The mob protested, but the guards held position. Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Clara took a call, spoke in low, urgent tones, hung up. "Ms. Harris wants to see you." David had heard the name. Everyone had heard the name. Rebecca Harris, tech industry CEO, one of those people who existed in a different atmosphere from regular humanity. Magazine covers, charity galas, carefully curated social media presence that made everything look effortless. The kind of person who didn't typically notice the maintenance contractor fixing her basement wiring. "That's not necessary, I was just doing my job." It wasn't a request. Clara led him through the main house, past rooms filled with art David couldn't identify and furniture that belonged in museums. Marble floors, high ceilings that caught sound and turned it into echo. The whole place felt less like a home and more like a monument to wealth so extreme it had lost connection to actual human living. They stopped at glass doors opening onto a private terrace. Clara knocked once and stepped aside. David pushed through. Rebecca Harris stood with her back to him, arms crossed, staring out at gardens that stretched toward distant tree lines. She wore a white linen shirt and dark jeans, deliberately plain, like someone trying to blend into the background of their own life. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She didn't turn immediately. "You fixed it." Her voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of careful tone that came from years of knowing every word would be analyzed and dissected. David stayed near the doorway. "Yes, ma'am, 2 minutes. The system was poorly installed, not complicated to repair." Everyone else told me hours, maybe days. They wanted to bring in teams, run diagnostics, charge me $10,000 for something you fixed in 2 minutes. They were probably looking to justify a bigger invoice. She turned then. Rebecca Harris was younger than David had expected, maybe 40, with a face that carried the kind of beauty that came from genetics and money in equal measure. But her eyes were tired, guarded, like she'd been bracing for disappointment long before David walked into the room. "You're honest." "I'm practical." She studied him for a moment with the focused attention of someone evaluating a problem from multiple angles. "What's your name again?" "David Thompson." "And you do maintenance work?" "Systems analysis and repair. 6 years freelance. I go where the work is." "And before that?" David shifted his weight slightly. "Construction. Residential builds, commercial retrofits, big crews, long hours. Then my wife passed away and I needed something with more flexible scheduling, something that let me be home when my daughter gets out of school." He didn't know why he volunteered the information. Personal details weren't professional. But something about the way Rebecca was looking at him, direct and unflinching, made the usual deflections feel pointless. Rebecca's expression didn't change, but something softened in her posture. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. "I'm sorry. It was 4 years ago." "That doesn't make it easier." "No, it doesn't." Silence settled between them, not awkward, but weighted with the kind of honesty that didn't usually exist between strangers. Outside, the garden stretched impossibly green and perfect, maintained by people David would probably never meet. "I have a daughter. She's 6. Her name's Emma." "And she's the reason you need flexible hours?" "Yeah. School pickups, doctor appointments, the occasional crisis when she decides to conduct science experiments that flood the bathroom, that kind of thing." Rebecca nodded slowly, filing the information somewhere specific. "I want to hire you full-time." David blinked. "I'm already contracted through the estate management company." "I know. I want to hire you directly. You'd work exclusively here, maintenance, repairs, system upgrades, whatever needs doing. The pay is triple your current rate, and the hours are whatever you need them to be. If you need to leave for your daughter, you leave. No questions asked." David processed that. Triple pay would mean no more choosing between rent and groceries in the same month. Flexible hours would mean actually showing up to parent-teacher conferences and Emma's school concerts. It was the kind of offer that sounded too good, which meant there had to be a catch. "That's extremely generous." "It's practical. The people I've hired before were either incompetent or actively trying to take advantage of me." "You're neither. You don't know that. You just met me 10 minutes ago. I know you fixed a critical security failure in 2 minutes while everyone else stood around panicking. I know you didn't ask for extra or try to upsell me on unnecessary work. And I know you're raising a daughter alone, which means you understand responsibility in a way most people don't. David didn't know what to say to that. The offer sat between them like something real and fragile. I'll need to think about it. Of course. Rebecca pulled a card from her back pocket and handed it to him. Simple white paper, expensive feel, single phone number printed in black ink. No name, no title. Call me when you've decided. David took the card. Can I ask why you're doing this? Rebecca turned back to the window. Because I need someone I can trust. And trust is in extremely short supply around here. She didn't say anything else, and David understood the conversation was over. He slipped the card into his pocket and left the terrace, Clara waiting in the hallway to escort him out. Back in his truck, David had stared at that card for a long time before driving to pick up Emma from school. Triple the pay, flexible hours, working for someone who apparently valued competence over credentials. It felt like the kind of break that didn't happen to people like him, which made it suspect, which made it exactly the kind of opportunity his late wife would have told him to take anyway. Sarah had believed in practical optimism, the idea that you acknowledged risks, but didn't let fear make your decisions. 4 years dead, and David could still hear her voice in his head, usually when he was overthinking something that required action instead of analysis. He'd called the number 3 days later. Rebecca had answered on the second ring. This is Rebecca. It's David Thompson. I'll take the job, but I need Fridays off for Emma's school activities, and if her school calls during the day, I'm leaving immediately, no questions asked. There had been a pause on the other end, then a single word. Deal. Just like that? Just like that. You don't want references, background check, anything? I already ran a background check. You're clean, no criminal record, no debt problems, excellent work history, 4 years as primary caregiver to a child with a chronic health condition. You're reliable. That's what I need. David had felt something between impressed and disturbed that she'd already vetted him. Okay then. Can you start Monday? Yes. Good. Clara will have everything ready for you. She'd hung up before David could say anything else. That had been 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks of working quietly through the estate's endless maintenance needs, rewiring panels that should have been replaced a decade earlier, fixing irrigation systems that flooded lawns, overhauling HVAC units held together by duct tape and wishful thinking. The work was straightforward and David was good at it, which meant he could move through his days without much interaction with the household staff who watched him with polite distance and probably gossiped about him when he wasn't around. He'd seen Rebecca 4 times in those first weeks. Once from across the garden where she was having what looked like an intense phone conversation, gesturing with sharp, frustrated movements. Once in a hallway near the east wing where she was moving fast with a phone pressed to her ear, documents tucked under one arm. She'd glanced at him, he'd nodded, she'd nodded back. That was it. The third time was in the library, past midnight, when David was replacing faulty lighting fixtures. Rebecca had been at a desk surrounded by papers and laptop screens, so focused she hadn't noticed him until he accidentally knocked a screwdriver off his ladder. She'd looked up, startled, then relaxed slightly when she saw it was him. Working late? Emergency board meeting tomorrow, preparing ammunition. She'd gone back to her work without further comment, and David had finished the repair in silence. The fourth encounter happened in the basement 2 weeks into the job. David had been wrestling with an ancient heating system that looked like it predated indoor plumbing when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Rebecca descended in gym clothes, hair tied back in a messy bun, no makeup. She looked different like this, younger, almost normal, if you ignored the fact that her running shoes probably cost more than David's monthly grocery bill. Didn't expect to find anyone down here. David kept his focus on the furnace innards. Just fixing the heating system? Winter's coming and this thing's held together with optimism and very little else. That's most of this house, honestly. You'd never know it from the outside. That's usually the point. She'd leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. David had felt her gaze like physical weight, but kept his attention on the wiring. The silence stretched, but didn't feel uncomfortable. Just 2 people sharing space without needing to fill it with performance. How's your daughter? The question had surprised him enough that he looked up. She's good. Had a school concert last week, sang a solo in the 2nd grade chorus. Did she do well? She forgot half the words and made up the rest on the spot. Something about sunshine and pizza. It was perfect. Rebecca had laughed, short and surprised, completely genuine. The sound echoed slightly in the concrete space. I would have paid good money to see that. Next time I'll send you a video. The words came out before David could stop them, casual and easy, like they were friends instead of employer and employee, like there wasn't a massive gap between their worlds. But Rebecca didn't seem to mind. I'd like that. More silence. Different quality now, less formal, almost comfortable in the way two people could share space without needing to perform for each other. Can I ask you something? David had set down his tools. Go ahead. Why do you live like this? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Like what? Alone? In a house the size of a hotel, with guards and gates and staff who don't talk to you unless you're paying them to? That's kind of a rude question. You don't have to answer it. She'd been quiet for a long moment, and David thought maybe he'd overstepped. But then she spoke, voice softer than before. Because if I don't control the space around me, someone else will. And I've learned the hard way that most people only want proximity to power. Not to me. They want what I represent, what I can do for them, what doors I can open. But they don't actually want to know me. David had set down his wrench and turned to look at her directly. That sounds incredibly lonely. It is. She'd said it without self-pity, without drama, just stated it as simple fact the way you might comment on weather. And something about the honesty of it, the complete lack of pretense, made David's chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in years. For what it's worth, I don't care about your money or your name or what doors you can open. I'm just here to fix the HVAC and make sure your house doesn't fall apart. Rebecca had smiled again, and this time it reached her eyes. I know. That's why I hired you. She'd pushed off the door frame and headed back toward the stairs, pausing halfway up. David? Yeah? Thank you for being honest. Then she was gone, footsteps fading into the upper levels of the house. David had stood there for a moment, surrounded by pipes and ancient machinery, trying to ignore the fact that his heart was beating slightly faster than it should be. Over the following weeks, the encounters became more frequent. Rebecca started finding reasons to be wherever David was working. A question about plumbing in the guest bathroom. A request to check flickering lights in the library. A casual comment about weather while he was replacing guttering on the south roof. Small things. Excuses, really. And David, despite knowing better, despite every instinct telling him this was dangerous territory, started looking forward to them. They talked about everything and nothing. Emma's upcoming science fair project on volcanoes, the terrible estate coffee that somehow cost $40 a pound, Rebecca's frustration with a board meeting that had devolved into 2 hours of men talking over each other, David's theory that every house built after 1995 was a wiring disaster because contractors cut corners and inspectors stopped caring. It was easy. Too easy. The conversations felt natural in a way nothing in David's life had felt natural since Sarah died. He didn't have to perform or pretend or carefully measure his words. He could just talk. And Rebecca listened like she actually cared about what he was saying. One afternoon in late October, David was replacing a broken window latch in the guest house, a small stone cottage on the far edge of the property, tucked behind gardens and a line of oak trees. It was quiet there, private, the kind of place where you could forget the rest of the world existed. He heard the door open behind him. Rebecca stood in the doorway holding 2 ceramic mugs, steam rising from both. Thought I'd find you here. David glanced over his shoulder. Bribe or apology? Neither, just coffee. The good kind, not the estate kitchen disaster. She handed him one and sat on the arm of an old leather couch near the window. David took a sip. It was good, rich and smooth, tasting like actual coffee instead of burnt water. This place used to be my favorite when I was younger, before everything got so complicated. I'd come here to get away from it all. My parents, the press, the constant expectations. I could just sit here and read or think or do absolutely nothing. And now? Now I own the entire estate and I still feel like I'm hiding. David set the mug down on the windowsill. You don't have to explain yourself to me. I know. But I want to. She looked at him then, really looked at him with those tired, guarded eyes, and David felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time, something he'd convinced himself he'd never feel again, something dangerous. Rebecca, I'm not asking for anything. I like talking to you. You don't treat me like I'm made of glass or like I'm some untouchable icon. You treat me like a regular person, and I can't tell you how rare that is. You are a regular person. Not to most people. David had stood there in that quiet cottage, drinking expensive coffee with a woman who had everything the world could offer and somehow still seemed like she had nothing at all. And for the first time in 4 years, he'd let himself feel something other than responsibility and exhaustion. But he'd also thought about Emma, about stability, about the fact that his daughter had already lost one person she loved and didn't need to risk losing another. He'd thought about the power imbalance, about the fact that Rebecca was his employer, about all the ways this could end badly. So he'd set down the coffee and picked up his tools. I should finish this repair. Still have 3 more windows to check before end of day. Rebecca's expression had shifted slightly, something flickering across her face too quick to read. Disappointment, maybe, or relief, or both. Of course, I'll let you work. She'd left the cottage and David had finished the window repairs alone, and if his hands shook slightly it was just the cold November air coming through the broken latch. Now, sitting in a hospital room watching his daughter sleep while machines beeped her heartbeat into the sterile air, David thought about choices and timing and the way life had of demanding decisions at the exact moments you were least equipped to make them. His phone buzzed. Another message from Clara. Ms. Harris asks if she can do anything. David stared at the screen. Rebecca Harris, who lived in a fortress and controlled everything, asking if she could help. The woman who'd walked out of board meetings and late-night work sessions to have coffee with him in a cottage that used to be her sanctuary. The person who'd somehow become something more than an employer without David quite noticing when it happened. He typed, "Just waiting on tests. Should know more in a couple hours." The response came fast. "Let me know." Dr. Patel returned at 5:30 with test results in careful professional language that translated to uncertainty. The arrhythmia was concerning but not immediately dangerous. Emma's murmur had progressed slightly. Medication adjustment recommended. Close monitoring required. Possible intervention in the future but not urgent. Possible intervention meant surgery. Future meant anywhere from months to years. Not urgent meant they'd bought time but not resolution. Emma woke up during the doctor's explanation, listened with the serious attention she brought to adult conversations, asked 3 precise questions about what the medication change would feel like. Dr. Patel answered honestly, treating Emma like a person capable of understanding her own condition, which David appreciated more than he knew how to express. They were cleared to go home by 8 p.m. with a prescription, a follow-up appointment in 2 weeks, and instructions to call immediately if anything felt wrong. David carried Emma to the truck even though she was perfectly capable of walking, needed to feel her weight in his arms, needed the physical confirmation that she was still here, still his, still breathing. The drive home was quiet. Emma fell asleep in the passenger seat, head tilted against the window. David kept glancing over to make sure her chest was rising and falling with regular rhythm. His phone buzzed at a red light. Text from Rebecca. "Is she okay?" David typed one-handed. "Home now, stable, medication adjusted. Thank you for asking." 3 dots appeared immediately, pulsed, disappeared. Then, "I'm glad she's all right." The light turned green. David drove home through city streets that looked exactly the same as they had that morning, which felt wrong somehow, like the world should have reorganized itself to reflect the fact that everything had telescoped down to a single point of terror, and then, mercifully, expanded again. He carried Emma upstairs to their apartment, tucked her into bed without changing her clothes, watched her sleep for 10 minutes before forcing himself to leave her doorway. The kitchen was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Pancake batter still in the mixing bowl, Emma's medication bottle on the counter, old prescription now obsolete. David's phone buzzed again. Not Rebecca this time. "Clara. Ms. Harris would like to see you tomorrow if you're available. No pressure. Whenever works for your schedule." David stared at that message for a long time. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Emma would be at school, assuming she felt well enough to go. He had work scheduled at the estate anyway, circuit breaker replacement in the West Wing. He typed back, "I'll be there, normal time." The response was immediate. "Thank you." David made himself eat something that might have been dinner, checked on Emma twice more, finally collapsed into his own bed past midnight. Sleep came in fragments, broken by phantom sounds that might have been Emma calling for him, but never were. At 7:30 the next morning he made pancakes again, measured out the new medication, watched Emma swallow it with orange juice and make the same face she always made. She seemed tired but steady, no chest pain, no irregular heartbeat he could detect with his completely untrained ear. "Do you want to stay home from school?" Emma considered that seriously. "Will you be here?" "I can call into work. Then I'll go to school. You shouldn't miss work because of me." David's chest tightened. 6 years old and already trying to protect him from consequences. Sarah's daughter through and through. He dropped Emma at school with careful instructions to the nurse about the medication change, made the drive to the estate running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. Clara met him at the service entrance with an expression that managed to convey both professional distance and genuine concern. "How is she?" "Stable. Medication adjusted. They're monitoring her closely." Clara nodded. "Ms. Harris is in her office. She asked if you could stop by before starting on the West Wing repairs." David followed Clara through the main house to a wing he'd never accessed, upstairs to a second-floor office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the east gardens. Rebecca sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than David's truck, but she stood when he entered, and the corporate armor she usually wore seemed slightly loosened. "How's Emma?" "She's okay. Tests showed the murmur progressed slightly, but nothing requiring immediate intervention. New medication protocol, close monitoring, possible surgery down the line, but not urgent." Rebecca's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "I'm glad she's all right. And I'm glad you felt comfortable texting me updates. I know we're employer and employee, but I hope you know I care about your family's well-being beyond professional obligation." David nodded, not quite trusting his voice. The exhaustion was catching up, making everything feel slightly unreal. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Please sit." David sat in a chair that was probably designed by someone famous. Rebecca stayed standing, moved to the window, classic executive power move, except she looked uncomfortable doing it, like someone performing a role they'd learned but never fully inhabited. "Yesterday when Emma was in the hospital, you texted me. You didn't have to. I'm your employer, not your friend, not your family, but you reached out anyway. You'd asked Clara to check on me. It felt rude not to respond. That's not why you did it." David waited. Rebecca turned from the window. "I left a budget meeting yesterday. Walked out in the middle of presentations. Kenneth Moore, one of the board members, actually challenged me about it. I told him it was an emergency and that's all he needed to know. But the truth is, I left because someone I care about was dealing with something terrifying and I wanted him to know he wasn't alone." The words hung in the air between them, too honest for an office conversation, too direct for professional distance. "Rebecca, I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer. I know there's a power imbalance and about 8 different HR violations happening just in this conversation, but I need to be clear with you about something." She crossed back to the desk but didn't sit, just stood there looking at David with those guarded eyes that for once weren't quite so guarded. "When I'm with you, I don't have to perform. I can just exist. And yesterday when I got that text about Emma, my first thought wasn't about work or the meeting or what the board would think. My first thought was that I needed to be wherever you were, even if that meant just sitting in a waiting room not saying anything. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" David understood. He understood that this brilliant, powerful, careful woman was standing in front of him, admitting to something that could complicate both their lives in ways that would be difficult to untangle. He understood that his heart was beating too fast, and his hands were shaking slightly, and 4 years of careful emotional distance were crumbling under the weight of honest human connection. He also understood that his daughter had just spent hours in a hospital, that stability mattered more than chemistry, that he needed to be careful. "I appreciate that. I do. But I need to be careful about who I bring into Emma's life. She's already lost her mother. I can't introduce someone unless I'm certain they're going to stay." Rebecca nodded slowly. I understand, and I respect that. I'm not asking you to introduce me to Emma or change anything about how we work together. I'm just being honest about where I am. What you do with that honesty is entirely your choice." David stood. "I should start on those circuit breakers." "Of course." He made it to the door before Rebecca spoke again. "David, for what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere. Whether you choose to acknowledge this or not, I'll still be here." David turned back. Rebecca stood silhouetted against the window. Expensive office, expensive view, everything money could buy. Except the one thing she was asking for. "I know," he said. "That's what makes this hard." He left the office and found his way back to the service areas where work made sense and choices had clear right answers, and his heart didn't feel like it was trying to escape his chest. The circuit breaker replacement took 4 hours. David worked with focused intensity, channeling everything he couldn't say into precise mechanical action. By the time he finished, Emma's school day was almost over. He cleaned his tools, checked his phone, found a text from Emma's teacher. "She did great today. No issues. See you at pickup." Relief washed through him, followed immediately by exhaustion. He made it to his truck, sat in the driver's seat, closed his eyes. His phone buzzed. "Rebecca, thank you for being honest this morning. I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere." David stared at that message, then at Emma's smiling face in the photo stuck to his dashboard, then at the estate looming in his rearview mirror like something from a different world. He didn't respond to Rebecca's text. He drove to Emma's school, watched his daughter emerge from the building with a drawing she'd made in art class, another building with another small figure in a high window, the castle lady again. "Who is she?" David asked on the drive home. Emma studied her drawing. "I don't know her name, but I think she's sad even though she has a big house. I think she needs friends." David glanced at his daughter, this wise, strange, beautiful child who saw things adults tried to hide. "Maybe she does." That night after Emma was asleep, David sat at the kitchen table with Sarah's photo, the one he kept in his wallet, 4 years old now and starting to crease along the edges. His late wife smiled out at him from a moment frozen in time, a picnic 2 months before diagnosis, before everything changed. "I don't know what to do," he said to the photograph, to the memory, to the empty kitchen. "She's not you. She could never be you. But when I'm with her, I feel like I can breathe again. And I don't know if that's betraying you or if that's what you'd want for me. I don't know if I'm being careful enough with Emma, or if I'm being so careful I'm missing something that could be good for both of us." The photograph didn't answer. It never did. But David sat there for a long time anyway, talking to ghosts and trying to figure out how you moved forward, when moving forward felt like leaving someone behind. His phone buzzed one more time before he went to bed. "Rebecca, sleep well?" David typed back, "You too." 2 words, not a commitment, not a rejection, just acknowledgement that she was there and he knew it. He checked on Emma 3 times before finally falling asleep just past midnight, and in his dreams, Sarah was telling him something important, but he couldn't quite hear the words. And when he woke at dawn, the message had dissolved into nothing but the sense that he needed to make a choice soon. The world was waiting for an answer he didn't know how to give. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost sustainable until it didn't. David worked his way through the estate's endless catalog of failing systems, while Emma's medication adjustment held steady and Rebecca found increasingly transparent reasons to be in whatever room he was repairing. The November chill deepened into December cold, and the staff gossip that had been background noise started developing sharper edges. Clara caught David in the service hallway on a Tuesday morning, her usual professional mask slipping just enough to show concern underneath. "People are talking." David closed the electrical panel he'd been inspecting. "About what?" "About you and her. About the amount of time Ms. Harris spends wherever you happen to be working. About the fact that she left an important budget meeting 3 weeks ago and nobody knows why except that you weren't here that afternoon. The hospital. The day Emma collapsed. Of course, people had noticed Rebecca's absence and filled the void with speculation that landed closer to truth than David would have preferred. "There's nothing to talk about." Clara's expression said she wanted to believe that. Doesn't matter if it's true. Perception shapes reality in houses like this, and right now people are perceiving something. I'm doing my job, that's all. I know that. I believe that. But you need to understand how this works. This estate is a fishbowl. Everyone watches everyone else. If the staff thinks something's happening between you and Ms. Harris, it becomes the story regardless of facts. Stories have momentum. They escape containment. David felt the warning settle in his chest like weight. What do you want me to do about it? Be careful. Keep distance. Don't give them ammunition. She walked away before David could respond, leaving him alone with a half-repaired electrical system and the growing certainty that careful distance wasn't something he knew how to maintain anymore. That evening, after most of the staff had gone home, David found Rebecca in the library working through documents that covered half the massive oak table. She looked up when he entered, and something in her expression shifted from professional focus to something warmer, more unguarded. The south wing lighting is fixed. Should hold through winter, but you'll want a full rewiring next spring. Rebecca set down her pen. Thank you. Can you stay for a minute? David knew he should make an excuse about Emma's bedtime or early morning commitments, anything to maintain the distance Clara had warned about. Instead, he closed the library door and sat in the chair across from Rebecca. Clara talked to you today. It wasn't a question. Rebecca had probably heard the same warnings from different sources. She did. And she told you people are noticing? Yeah. Rebecca leaned back, studied him with those sharp, tired eyes. I've been CEO of this company for 8 years. I've dealt with hostile boards, activist investors, 3 attempted coups by executives who thought they could do better. I know how to handle gossip. This isn't corporate politics. This is your personal life. My personal life stopped being personal the day I inherited this company. Everything is scrutinized, analyzed, weaponized. If people are going to talk, they'll talk regardless of what we do or don't do. David felt tension building in his shoulders. That's easy to say when your daughter isn't the one who might get caught in the crossfire. Rebecca's expression tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? You live in a fortress with security teams and legal departments. Emma goes to public school where kids repeat whatever their parents say at dinner. I need to think about her exposure. Then what do you want to do? Stop talking? Pretend we don't enjoy each other's company? Go back to purely professional interaction? The questions hung between them like challenges. David wanted to say yes, wanted to choose the safe path, wanted to protect Emma from complications she didn't need. But he also remembered Rebecca driving 40 minutes to sit with him in a hospital waiting room for 3 hours without explanation or expectation. He remembered conversations in basement workshops and guesthouse cottages that felt more real than anything in his life for the past 4 years. I don't know what I want. That's the problem. Rebecca stood, moved to the window where night had turned the glass into a mirror reflecting the room back at itself. I know what I want. I want to stop pretending this doesn't matter. I want to acknowledge that when you're here I feel less alone than I've felt in a decade. I want to see where this goes without constantly calculating risk and managing perception. And when it affects your business, your board position, when people start questioning your judgment, let them question. I'm tired of living my entire life according to other people's comfort levels. David crossed to where she stood, close enough to see her reflection in the darkened window. You say that now, but when it gets complicated, when there's actual cost, you might change your mind. Rebecca turned to face him directly. Is that what you think? That I'll bail when things get difficult? I think you're used to controlling outcomes, and this isn't something you can control. Neither are you, apparently. The words came out sharper than intended. They stood there in the lamplight of the too large library, neither willing to back down, neither quite willing to push forward. David felt the weight of every careful choice he'd made since Sarah died, pressing against the pull of something that felt inevitable and terrifying in equal measure. Rebecca spoke first, voice quieter now. I'm not asking you to introduce me to Emma tomorrow. I'm not asking you to change your entire life overnight. I'm just asking if you feel what I feel when we're in the same room. David wanted to lie. Lying would be safer. But Rebecca had asked for honesty, and he'd built whatever this was on not hiding behind comfortable fiction. Yeah, I feel it. Then that's enough for now. We don't have to decide everything tonight. She reached out and took his hand, simple gesture that shouldn't have felt as significant as it did. Her palm was warm against his. They stood there for a moment that stretched longer than moments usually lasted. Then David stepped back because if he didn't step back he was going to kiss her, and kissing her in the estate library felt like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. I should get home. Emma has school tomorrow. Rebecca nodded, let her hand fall. Drive safe. David made it to his truck before his phone buzzed. Text from Rebecca. Thank you for being honest. That's all I need. He didn't respond. He drove home through streets that felt colder than they should and found Emma asleep on the couch with her sketchbook open across her chest. The latest drawing showed two figures this time, the castle lady and a smaller figure standing outside the castle gates. The smaller figure was holding tools. David carried his daughter to bed and stared at that drawing for a long time before finally turning off the lights. The next day brought the kind of sharp December morning that made breath visible and turned the estate gardens into something from a winter postcard. David was replacing corroded pipes in the north wing bathroom when his phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. A man's voice, professional and confident, introduced himself as Harrison Webb from Summit Solutions, a corporate recruiting firm based in Seattle. They had a position David might be interested in: facilities management for a tech campus, full benefits package, salary in the mid-six figures, relocation assistance included. David set down his wrench. I'm not looking for a new job. I understand, but I think you'll want to hear the details. The compensation is competitive and the opportunity for advancement is significant. Plus, Seattle has excellent schools and some of the best pediatric cardiology programs in the country. That last detail landed too precisely to be coincidence. Nobody mentioned pediatric cardiology in a cold recruiting call unless they knew about Emma's condition, which meant somebody had provided very specific information about David's personal situation. How did you get my number? Pause on the other line. Your name came through professional channels. The offer is legitimate, Mr. Thompson. I'll email you the full details. Please take some time to consider it. Webb hung up before David could press further. The email arrived within 10 minutes. Everything Webb had described rendered in official letterhead and precise salary figures. The kind of offer that would fundamentally change Emma's life: access to top medical care, better schools, financial security that would let David stop worrying about covering rent and groceries in the same month. The kind of offer someone engineered specifically to look irresistible. David forwarded the email to Rebecca with a single line. Did you know about this? Her response came back within minutes. No, but I'm going to find out who did. The answer arrived 45 minutes later via phone call. Rebecca's voice carried controlled fury barely held in check. Kenneth Moore, board member. He hired the recruiting firm, provided them with your background information, instructed them to make you an offer attractive enough that you'd be stupid to refuse. David felt cold settle in his chest. Why would he do that? Because he thinks you're a distraction. He's been pushing back on some strategic decisions I've made, building coalition among board members who think I'm too young or too female or too whatever to run this company effectively. He can't remove me directly, but he can try to remove anything he perceives as weakening my position. I'm not a distraction. I know that. He doesn't care. To him, you're a problem with a solution. David sat down on the edge of the bathtub he'd been repairing, phone pressed to his ear, trying to process the fact that someone had weaponized his daughter's medical needs to manipulate him into leaving. What do you want me to do? Rebecca's laugh held no humor. I want you to do whatever is actually best for Emma. That's the only calculation that matters here. The money would change her life. Access to better doctors, better schools, actual financial security. I know. But taking it means letting some board member dictate my choices. Means accepting that I can be bought off. It's not being bought off if it genuinely serves Emma's interests. You can't make this decision based on pride or spite or what Kenneth Moore deserves. You have to make it based on what your daughter needs. David closed his eyes. What do you need? That's not a fair question. You brought it up. What do you need from this situation? Silence stretched across the line. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice carried something raw underneath the control. "I need you to stay. I need you to not disappear because some corporate shark found your pressure point and squeezed. But I can't say that. I can't ask you to choose me over Emma's well-being. That's not who I am. Then I need time to think. Take all the time you need." David ended the call and sat in the half-renovated bathroom staring at tile that needed replacing and trying to figure out how you weighed your child's medical future against your own barely acknowledged feelings for someone who existed in an entirely different economic stratosphere. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma's school. Reminder: winter concert Thursday 6 p.m. Students should arrive by 5:30. David stared at that message, then at the recruiting email still open on his screen, then at nothing in particular. Sarah would have known what to do. Sarah had always been better at seeing through noise to actual signal, at making hard choices without getting paralyzed by second-guessing. But Sarah was 4 years dead, and David was alone with a decision that felt impossible from every angle. He picked up his wrench and went back to work on the pipes because work made sense, and fixing broken things gave him the illusion of control. That evening, David sat Emma down at their kitchen table after dinner. She looked at him with Sarah's eyes, patient and knowing, like she could already sense something serious was coming. "I got offered a new job. In Seattle. That's on the other side of the country." Emma set down her pencil. "Would we move there?" "If I took the job, yes. It pays a lot more money. Enough that we could have a bigger apartment, better schools for you. And Seattle has really good doctors for your heart condition." "Would I have to leave my school?" "Yeah. You'd go to a new school, make new friends." Emma was quiet, processing with the careful consideration she brought to important questions. "What about Miss Rebecca?" The name hit David harder than it should have. "What about her? Would we still see her if we moved?" "Probably not. Seattle's really far away." Emma picked up her pencil, started adding detail to the drawing she'd been working on. "Do you want to move?" "I don't know. The job would give us things we don't have now. Better opportunities for you." "But would you be happy?" The question stopped David cold. "What do you mean?" "You've been happier lately, since you started working at the big house. I notice things. You smile more. You don't get that sad look when you think I'm not watching. Would you still be happy if we moved to Seattle and didn't see Miss Rebecca anymore?" David felt his throat tighten. 6 years old, and his daughter could read him better than he could read himself. "It's complicated, baby." "Is it? You always tell me that if something makes you happy and doesn't hurt anyone, you should do it. Does being around Miss Rebecca hurt anyone?" "No." "Then why would we leave?" David didn't have a good answer for that. He sat there watching his daughter draw, this wise, strange child who somehow understood things adults spent years in therapy failing to grasp. Emma looked up from her sketch. "I don't want to move. I like my school and my friends and my soccer team, and I think you like Miss Rebecca even though you haven't said it yet." "Emma, it's okay to like someone, Daddy. Mommy would want you to be happy. She told me that before she got really sick. She said you'd find someone else someday, and that would be okay because love doesn't run out." David felt tears threatening and pushed them back. "When did she tell you that?" "The hospital, near the end. She was worried about you being alone. She made me promise to tell you it was okay to be happy again." 4 years Emma had been carrying that message. 4 years of watching her father navigate widowhood and single parenthood without ever delivering her mother's final instruction. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "You weren't ready before. But now you smile more and you talk about Miss Rebecca even when you don't mean to, so I think you're ready now." David pulled his daughter into a hug and held on tight, this brilliant, perceptive child who'd lost her mother too young and still had the emotional capacity to give her father permission to move forward. "I love you, buddy. I love you too, and I still don't want to move to Seattle. The weather's probably terrible there anyway." David laughed, despite everything. "Okay. No Seattle. Good. Now can you help me with my math homework? Multiplication is still confusing." They worked through math problems until Emma's bedtime. Then David tucked her in and sat in the kitchen with his laptop open to Harrison Webb's email. He typed a response. Thank you for the offer. After careful consideration, I'm declining. My daughter and I are staying where we are." He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then forwarded the sent message to Rebecca. "Told them no. Emma and I aren't going anywhere." Rebecca's response came back immediately. "Are you sure? My daughter just gave me permission to be happy. Apparently her mother told her to tell me that 4 years ago, and she was waiting for the right moment. So, yeah, I'm sure." 3 dots appeared, pulsed, disappeared. Then, "Your daughter sounds like she inherited her mother's wisdom. Among other things, she also told me you make me smile more, and I talk about you even when I don't mean to." "Do you?" "Apparently. That's good to know." David stared at the screen, at this conversation happening in text messages because saying it out loud felt too vulnerable, too real. He typed, "She wants to meet you. Officially, I mean, not just seeing you around the estate." The typing indicator appeared and stayed for a long time before Rebecca's response came through. "I would like that very much." They made plans for Saturday. Neutral territory, somewhere Emma would feel comfortable. The Natural History Museum, public enough to feel safe, interesting enough to give them things to talk about besides the awkward fact that they were meeting for the first time as actual people instead of just the lady from the castle in Emma's drawings. David barely slept Thursday night, ran through conversations in his head, worried about everything that could go wrong. Emma seemed unconcerned, more interested in her winter concert than in meeting Rebecca, which was probably the healthier perspective. The concert went fine. Emma sang her part without inventing new lyrics, remembered to bow when the chorus finished, found David in the audience afterward with a gap-toothed smile that made his chest ache. Normal 6-year-old stuff, the kind of ordinary, beautiful moment that made everything else feel manageable. Friday morning, David got to the estate early to finish the north wing pipework before the weekend. Clara intercepted him at the service entrance with an expression that managed to broadcast urgency without breaking professional composure. "Ms. Harris needs to see you. Her office now." David followed Clara up to the second-floor office where Rebecca sat behind her desk with a tablet displaying what looked like a news article. She turned the screen toward him as he entered. The headline read, "Tech CEO Rebecca Harris, Ethics Questions Over Relationship with Estate Worker." David's stomach dropped. Below the headline was a photo, grainy and telephoto, showing Rebecca and David leaving the hospital together 3 weeks ago. The article itself was thin on facts, heavy on speculation, quotes from unnamed staff members about how much time Rebecca spent with the maintenance contractor, concerns about appropriate boundaries, questions about judgment. "Where did this come from?" Rebecca's voice was cold and controlled. "Kenneth Moore leaked it to a business gossip site. They published it this morning. It's already being picked up by larger outlets." David read through the article, watching his private life get dissected by strangers who had exactly zero actual information but infinite capacity for assumption. "What do we do?" "My publicist is drafting a statement. Something about my personal life being my own business and declining to comment on baseless speculation. It won't kill the story, but it might contain it. This is my fault. I should have been more careful." Rebecca stood, moved around the desk. "This is Kenneth Moore's fault. He manufactured a crisis because he couldn't remove me through legitimate channels. Don't take ownership of his manipulation. Emma's going to see this. Kids at school will talk. Their parents will talk." "I know. I'm sorry." David felt anger building underneath the shock, not at Rebecca, but at the entire situation, at the fact that his daughter's life was about to get complicated because he'd made the mistake of caring about someone in a different economic bracket. "Maybe I should have taken the Seattle job." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Don't say that. Kenneth wins if you let this scare you into running. This isn't about winning or losing. This is about protecting Emma. Then protect her by showing her that doing the right thing sometimes means standing your ground when people try to shame you into hiding." David wanted to argue, wanted to point out that principles were easier to maintain when you had money and lawyers and institutional power. But he also knew Rebecca was right. Running to Seattle wouldn't protect Emma from gossip, would just teach her that other people's judgments controlled her father's choices. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma's school principal. Mr. Thompson, can you please call me when you have a moment? Nothing urgent, just want to touch base about something. David showed Rebecca the message. She winced. Go, call her. I'll handle the press situation. David stepped into the hallway and dialed the school. Principal Martinez answered on the second ring, voice professionally neutral in a way that broadcast concern. Mr. Thompson, thank you for calling back. I wanted to reach out personally before this becomes an issue. There's an article circulating online about you and Rebecca Harris. Some parents have seen it and there's been some talk. I wanted to make sure Emma's okay and see if there's anything the school should be aware of. David closed his eyes. Emma's fine. The article is gossip based on speculation. Ms. Harris is my employer. Beyond that, my personal life is my own business. Of course, I'm not trying to pry. I just wanted to let you know that if any children say things to Emma, we'll address it immediately. No child should be subjected to adult gossip. I appreciate that. For what it's worth, Mr. Thompson, I've known you for 2 years. You're a good father. Don't let strangers on the internet tell you otherwise. The kindness in her voice made David's throat tight. Thank you. He ended the call and leaned against the hallway wall, trying to process the fact that his daughter's school principal had felt compelled to reach out because internet gossip had reached suburban parents fast enough to require preemptive damage control. Rebecca emerged from her office. How bad? Principal's aware, says she'll shut down any kid stuff, but parents are talking. I'm sorry. This shouldn't be happening. But it is happening, and tomorrow we're supposed to take Emma to the museum like everything's normal. Rebecca met his eyes. Do you want to cancel? David thought about Emma's drawing, about Sarah's message delivered 4 years late, about the fact that careful hiding hadn't protected them from exposure anyway. No, we go tomorrow. Emma's excited. I'm not going to teach her that gossip controls our choices. Rebecca smiled, small but genuine. Okay, tomorrow then. David went back to work on the pipes because he still had a job to do, regardless of what strangers were saying online. His phone buzzed periodically through the afternoon. Texts from people he hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly wanting to check in, curiosity disguised as concern. He ignored most of them. One message came from Clara. Staff meeting at 4 p.m. Ms. Harris addressing the situation. You should be there. David cleaned up his workspace and made his way to the main staff room by 4. 20 people gathered in uncomfortable proximity, household employees who usually maintained careful distance from each other, suddenly united by shared interest in drama. Rebecca stood at the front of the room, corporate armor fully deployed, every inch the CEO. I'm sure most of you have seen the article published this morning. I want to address it directly. My personal life is my own. Mr. Thompson is an exemplary employee. Anyone spreading gossip about either of us will be terminated immediately. This estate operates on professionalism and discretion. If you can't maintain both, you don't work here. Are we clear? Murmurs of assent rippled through the room. Rebecca's gaze landed on a few specific staff members, sending unmistakable messages about consequences. Good. Back to work. The room cleared quickly. David hung back as others filed out. Rebecca waited until they were alone. That won't stop all the talk, but it might slow it down. You didn't have to threaten to fire people over me. I didn't threaten to fire people over you. I threatened to fire people for unprofessional conduct. There's a difference. David wanted to argue but couldn't find the angle. Rebecca had drawn a line using institutional power and made it clear which side of the line led to unemployment. Tomorrow's still on? Tomorrow's still on. Meet you at the museum main entrance, 10 o'clock? We'll be there. David drove home through Friday traffic, picked up Emma from after-school care, made dinner while she worked on homework at the kitchen table. She asked about his day. He said it was fine. She showed him a drawing of a dinosaur with improbable anatomy. He praised her creativity. They ate pasta and talked about her weekend plans and existed in the small, ordinary rhythms that made life manageable. After Emma was asleep, David opened his laptop and made the mistake of reading the comments on the article about him and Rebecca. Strangers with strong opinions about people they'd never met, assumptions about gold-digging motivations and poor judgment, speculation about what a maintenance worker could possibly offer a billionaire CEO beyond obvious transactional benefits. He closed the laptop before he could read deeper, but the damage was done. The comments settled in his mind like poison, whispering all the doubts he'd been trying to ignore. His phone buzzed. "Rebecca, don't read the comments. Trust me on this." Too late. They don't know you. They don't know me. They're just noise. Noise that Emma might hear. Then we deal with it together. That's what tomorrow is about, showing her that we're not hiding. David set down his phone and pulled out Sarah's photograph, the one he kept in his wallet. 4 years of wear had softened the image, but her smile still came through clear. "I hope I'm doing this right. Emma says you told her it was okay. I'm choosing to believe her. But if I'm screwing this up, if I'm putting her in a situation she doesn't need to be in, I could use a sign." The photograph offered no guidance. It never did. But David sat there with it anyway, talking to memory and hoping muscle memory of marriage could somehow translate into wisdom about whatever came next. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. David dressed Emma in her favorite purple jacket and they drove to the museum through weekend traffic. He spotted Rebecca standing near the entrance 20 minutes early, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, trying hard to look like a normal person visiting a museum on a Saturday morning. Emma saw her and waved. Rebecca waved back. David felt his heart rate pick up for no good reason except that this moment mattered in ways he couldn't quite articulate. They met on the museum steps. Emma looked up at Rebecca with direct, uncomplicated curiosity. "You're really pretty. Are you a princess?" Rebecca laughed, surprised and genuine. "No, definitely not a princess. My dad works at your house, right?" "He does. He fixes things that break. He's really good at fixing things. He fixed my bike last week and now it doesn't wobble anymore." "That's good to know. I have a lot of things that need fixing." Emma considered this seriously. "He says your house is really big, like a castle. Is it?" "It's big, but it's not as fun as you'd think." "Why not?" "Because big houses are kind of lonely when you live in them by yourself." Emma processed that with the grave attention she brought to adult problems. "You should get a dog. Dogs make houses less lonely." Rebecca's smile reached her eyes. "That's excellent advice. I'll think about it." They went into the museum and David watched his daughter and the woman who made him smile more interact with easy, natural chemistry that shouldn't have surprised him but somehow did. Emma led them from exhibit to exhibit, offering commentary on dinosaur extinction theories and the superiority of Triceratops over all other herbivores. Rebecca listened like Emma's opinions actually mattered, asked follow-up questions, treated her like a person capable of intelligent conversation rather than a child to be humored. In front of the massive T-Rex skeleton, Emma looked up at Rebecca with serious eyes. "I'm glad you make my dad happy. He deserves to be happy. My mom would want that." Rebecca glanced at David, then back at Emma. "I think your mom would be really proud of you." "You think so?" "I know so." They spent 3 hours in the museum, got ice cream despite the December cold, sat on a bench outside while Emma told them about her science fair volcano project in exhaustive detail. Rebecca asked questions about vinegar ratios and food coloring choices like volcanic eruptions were legitimate topics of adult conversation. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in the back seat, ice cream sugar crash hitting hard. David glanced in the rearview mirror at his daughter, then at Rebecca in the passenger seat. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being exactly who you are. Not performing, not pretending. Just being real with her." "She made it easy." "She's amazing, David." "Yeah, she is." Rebecca reached over and took his hand, simple gesture that shouldn't have felt as significant as it did. They drove through the afternoon light, Emma sleeping peacefully in back, and David let himself believe that maybe this could actually work. They pulled up to David's apartment building, modest and worn but home. Rebecca looked up at the second-floor windows. "This is you?" "This is us. Not much, but it's what we can manage." "I wasn't judging. I was just picturing where you live when you're not at the estate." Emma stirred in the back seat. David squeezed Rebecca's hand once and let go. "I should get her upstairs." "Of course." David opened the back door and lifted Emma out. She wrapped her arms around his neck without fully waking. Rebecca stood on the sidewalk watching with an expression David couldn't quite read. "Same time next week?" Rebecca smiled. "I'd like that." David carried his daughter upstairs and got her settled on the couch, then looked out the window to see Rebecca's car still parked below. He texted, "You okay?" Response came back immediately. "Just thinking about how different our lives are. Your apartment probably costs what I spend on coffee in a month. Does that bother you?" "No. It makes me think about how much I take for granted, how much space I have that feels empty while you and Emma make a two-bedroom apartment feel like an actual home." David didn't know how to respond to that. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before Rebecca's next message came through. "I meant what I said earlier, about not hiding anymore, about building something real instead of something contained. Emma's wonderful and you're wonderful and I want more of this, whatever this is." David typed, "Me too." 2 words carrying weight far beyond their simple construction. He watched Rebecca's car pull away from the curb and felt something settle in his chest. Not quite peace, but something adjacent to it, the sense that forward motion was possible even when the destination remained unclear. Emma woke up an hour later asking for dinner. David made grilled cheese and tomato soup while she told him about every single dinosaur they'd seen at the museum in comprehensive detail he'd already heard twice. "Miss Rebecca was nice. I like her." "I'm glad. Are you going to marry her?" David nearly dropped the spatula. "What? No, we're not. We just met. Officially, I mean." "But you like her?" "Yes. And she likes you." "I think so. Then you'll probably get married eventually. That's how it works." 6-year-old logic, simultaneously naive and perfectly accurate. David didn't have a counter-argument that wouldn't sound like he was overthinking something Emma had already solved with first principles reasoning. "Maybe someday, but not tomorrow." "Okay. Can I have extra cheese on my sandwich?" Crisis averted by dairy products. David finished making dinner, and they ate while Emma drew pictures of dinosaurs, and he tried not to think too hard about marriage, and eventually, and the fact that his daughter had apparently decided Rebecca was staying. His phone buzzed after Emma went to bed. Text from an unknown number. "Mr. Thompson, this is Kenneth Moore. I'd like to speak with you privately about a matter of mutual interest. There's a substantial financial opportunity that I believe would benefit both you and your daughter. Please call me at your earliest convenience." David stared at that message for a long time before forwarding it to Rebecca without comment. Her response was immediate. "Don't respond. Don't engage. He's looking for leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "The kind where he offers you money to disappear quietly, for Emma's sake. Best schools, best doctors. He'll frame it as caring about your daughter's future while actually trying to remove you from my life. That's manipulative as hell." "That's Kenneth Moore. He can't remove me from the CEO position, so he's trying to remove anything he perceives as weakening my focus. You're a problem with a solution as far as he's concerned." David felt cold anger building. "And if I take his money?" "Then he wins. And you teach Emma that principles are negotiable when the price is right." "And if I don't?" "Then he escalates. Probably leaks more stories. Maybe tries to create ethics complaints. Finds ways to make your life uncomfortable until you decide Seattle looks pretty good after all. So we're trapped either way." "We're not trapped. We're in a fight. There's a difference." David set down his phone and looked at Emma's latest drawing on the refrigerator. The castle lady and the smaller figure with tools, standing closer together now, both smiling in Emma's rough approximation of happiness. He picked up his phone and typed a response to Kenneth Moore. "I'm not interested in your opportunities. Don't contact me again." He sent a screenshot to Rebecca before he could second-guess himself. Her response, "Proud of you, but brace yourself. This isn't over." David knew she was right. Kenneth Moore didn't strike him as someone who accepted rejection gracefully, but standing his ground felt better than running. Felt like the kind of choice Sarah would have respected, the kind of example Emma deserved to see. He went to bed that night with his phone on silent, and Emma's drawing visible through his open bedroom door, and if sleep came slowly, at least it came eventually, dreamless and dark and blessedly free of decisions that needed making. Kenneth Moore's escalation came faster than David expected. Monday morning brought a new article, this one in a legitimate business publication rather than a gossip site, with quotes from unnamed board members expressing concern about Rebecca Harris's judgment and focus. The piece carefully avoided direct accusations, but the implication was clear. Young female CEO letting personal entanglements compromise professional responsibilities. David read it on his phone while sitting in his truck outside the estate gates. The article mentioned him only as an estate maintenance worker with no name, but anyone who'd seen the first piece could connect the dots easily enough. He forwarded it to Rebecca. Her response came back within seconds. Emergency board meeting called for Wednesday. Kenneth's making his move. What does that mean? Means he's going to try to remove me as CEO, or at least force me to address the relationship publicly. Either way, he's weaponizing us. David felt his jaw tighten. Tell me what to do. Go to work. Act normal. Don't give them anything else to use. Normal felt impossible, but David drove through the gates anyway, parked in the service lot, grabbed his toolbox. The West Wing circuit breaker replacement still needed finishing. Work continued regardless of corporate warfare. Clara met him in the hallway with an expression that broadcast apology before she spoke. Staff meeting this morning. Ms. Harris wants everyone present. 9 o'clock, main conference room. David checked his watch. 40 minutes. He headed to the service area to clean up, found several other staff members already gathered near the coffee station, conversations stopping abruptly when he entered. The silence felt deliberate and hostile. He poured coffee that tasted burnt, ignored the stares, went to wait outside the conference room. At 9 o'clock precisely, 23 staff members filed into a space designed for corporate presentations rather than household meetings. Rebecca stood at the front of the room, dressed in a dark suit that transformed her from the woman who'd eaten ice cream with Emma on Saturday into someone who commanded boardrooms and quarterly earnings calls. I'll keep this brief. Some of you may have seen articles circulating about my personal life. I want to make something absolutely clear. My personal life is my own. Mr. Thompson is an excellent employee. Beyond that, what happens outside work hours is not subject to staff discussion or judgment. Anyone spreading gossip or participating in speculation will be terminated immediately. This estate operates on discretion and professionalism. Maintain both or find employment elsewhere. Understood? Murmurs of acknowledgement rippled through the room. Rebecca's gaze swept across specific faces, landing hard enough to make her point without naming names. Good. That's all. The room emptied quickly. David stayed in his seat as others filed past, some looking sympathetic, others resentful, most just uncomfortable with the whole situation. When the room cleared, Rebecca crossed to where he sat. That won't stop all of it, but it might contain the worst. You shouldn't have to defend me to your own staff. I'm not defending you. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. David wanted to argue that the distinction didn't matter when she was still spending political capital on his behalf, but Rebecca's expression made it clear the discussion was closed. Wednesday's meeting. What happens there? Kenneth will present his case to the board, probably argue that I'm distracted, compromised, making emotional decisions instead of rational ones. He'll point to meetings I've delegated, time spent away from the office, declining to participate in certain strategic discussions. All of which is true. Rebecca's eyes flashed. All of which is me running the company the way I choose to run it. I've been CEO for 8 years. Our stock price has tripled. Revenue is up 40%. I'm not obligated to work 80-hour weeks just to prove my commitment. But he'll use it anyway. Of course he will. Facts don't matter when you're building a narrative. David felt the trap closing, pressure building from angles he couldn't directly address. Let me come to the meeting. Absolutely not. Why? If I'm the issue, let me address it directly. You're not the issue. Kenneth is. And putting you in a room with the board just gives him ammunition. He'll paint you as inappropriate, overstepping, proof that I've lost perspective. So I just sit here while he tries to destroy your career? Rebecca's expression softened slightly. You trust me to fix broken electrical systems. Trust me to handle broken board members. She left before David could respond. He sat in the empty conference room staring at presentation screens and leather chairs and trying to figure out how you fought battles when you weren't allowed in the room where they happened. His phone buzzed, text from Emma's school. "Mr. Thompson, Emma did great today. No issues. See you at pickup." Normal communication from a normal day, completely disconnected from the corporate warfare happening around him. David held on to that normalcy like a lifeline. Tuesday passed in tense quiet. David worked through maintenance requests, replaced broken fixtures, avoided conversations beyond professional necessity. The estate staff gave him wide berth. Whether from sympathy or judgment he couldn't tell and didn't care to analyze. Rebecca was in meetings all day, visible only as a distant figure moving between conference rooms with legal pads and determined expression. They didn't speak. That evening David picked up Emma from after-school care and took her to her favorite diner for burgers and milkshakes. She talked about her upcoming science fair project, showed him sketches of volcanic designs, asked if Miss Rebecca could come to the presentation. "Maybe. She's pretty busy this week." "With work stuff?" "Yeah, work stuff." Emma studied him with those too perceptive eyes. "Are people being mean to her?" David set down his burger. "What makes you ask that?" "You get quiet when people are mean to you. She probably gets quiet too. That's how it works." 6 years old and reading adult emotional patterns with unnerving accuracy. David wondered when his daughter had gotten so good at seeing things he tried to hide. "Some people don't understand why she hired me. They think it's inappropriate." "Because you're different from her?" "Something like that." Emma considered this while demolishing French fries. "That's stupid. You're really good at your job. She'd be stupid not to hire you." "It's more complicated than that, baby. Grown-ups always say things are complicated when they don't want to explain. But usually it's not actually complicated. Usually it's just people being stupid." David couldn't argue with that assessment. He finished his burger and listened to Emma explain proper lava-to-vinegar ratios for maximum volcanic effect and tried not to think about Wednesday morning. That night, after Emma was asleep, David's phone rang. Rebecca's number. "Are you okay?" Her voice carried exhaustion underneath the control. "Define okay." "I've spent 2 days preparing for tomorrow's meeting. My lawyers are confident we can shut Kenneth down, but confident isn't the same as certain." "What's the worst case?" "Worst case? The board forces me out as CEO. Install someone more pliable, someone who'll do what they want instead of what's right for the company. Kenneth gets control, probably drives everything into the ground within 2 years while enriching himself and his allies. And us? There is no us in that scenario. I'd be gone. You'd be unemployed. Kenneth would make sure you never worked at this level again." David felt cold settle in his stomach. "That's a lot of collateral damage over someone noticing we care about each other." "It's not about us. It never was. Kenneth's been looking for leverage to remove me for 2 years. We just gave him a convenient excuse." "So what do we do?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "Tomorrow I walk into that boardroom and I fight. I present evidence that I'm still the best person to run this company. I make them choose between Kenneth's manipulation and actual business results, and I hope that's enough. And if it's not, then we deal with whatever comes next, together." The word hung between them, promise and question in equal measure. David wanted to believe it meant something, that together could survive unemployment and public scrutiny and all the ways the world liked to punish people for crossing class boundaries. "Emma asked if you could come to her science fair presentation." Rebecca's voice brightened slightly. "When is it?" "Next Thursday, 6 o'clock. I know you'll be busy, but she specifically requested you." "I'll be there. Tell her I'll be there." "You don't have to promise if you're not sure." "I'm sure. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm not missing Emma's science fair." They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important, just the sound of each other's voices cutting through the tension. When they finally hung up, David felt marginally less alone with the uncertainty. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear. David dropped Emma at school and drove to the estate with his stomach in knots. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the main house conference room, the formal one reserved for quarterly presentations and strategic planning sessions. David parked in the service lot and sat there for 10 minutes trying to decide if showing up to work was brave or stupid. His presence wouldn't affect the meeting outcome, but absence felt like hiding, like letting fear make his choices. He grabbed his toolbox and headed inside. Clara intercepted him near the staff entrance. "You're here." "I work here. Ms. Harris said you might stay home today, given the circumstances." "The circumstances don't change the fact that the north wing bathroom still needs plumbing repairs." Clara looked at him with something that might have been respect. Board members started arriving 20 minutes ago. Black cars, serious faces, expensive suits. It's going to be ugly in there. Rebecca can handle ugly. I hope you're right. David went to the north wing and started work on corroded pipes that needed replacing. Physical labor gave his hands something to do, while his mind spun through scenarios he couldn't control. The conference room was 2 floors up and half a building away, but he imagined he could feel the tension radiating through the walls. At 10:15 his phone buzzed. Text from Rebecca. Meeting started. Kenneth opened with motion to review CEO performance and consider leadership changes. "Here we go." David typed back, "You've got this." No response. She was in the fight now, had bigger concerns than reassuring anxious contractors. The minutes crawled past. David replaced pipe sections with mechanical precision, tightened fittings, tested connections. At 11:30 his phone buzzed again. Rebecca. "Recess? It's not going well. Kenneth has more support than I expected. Vote might be close. What can I do?" "Nothing. Just know that I tried." The resignation in that message hit David harder than anger would have. He set down his wrench and sat on the bathroom floor, surrounded by half-assembled plumbing, trying to figure out if there was any play he could make that wouldn't make things worse. His phone rang. "Clara." "Where are you?" "North wing bathroom. Why?" "Get to the conference room. Now. Ms. Harris is asking for you." "I thought I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that meeting." "Plans changed. She's calling witnesses. You're one of them." David's heart rate spiked. "What do I say?" "The truth. That's all she needs." He cleaned his hands on his jeans and headed toward the main house, every step feeling like walking into an ambush he couldn't avoid. The conference room doors were closed when he arrived. Clara nodded toward them. "They're expecting you. Knock once and enter." David knocked. A voice from inside. "Come in." He pushed through the doors into a room that smelled like expensive coffee and corporate warfare. 12 people sat around a massive table, men and women in suits that cost more than David's monthly rent, faces ranging from curious to hostile. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, composed but clearly fighting. Kenneth Moore occupied the seat directly across from her, 50s, gray hair, expression that broadcast smug confidence. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for joining us. Please, sit." Rebecca gestured to an empty chair beside her. David crossed the room feeling a dozen sets of eyes evaluating everything from his worn work boots to the grease stains on his shirt. He sat. Kenneth leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, we appreciate you taking time from your duties to address some questions the board has about your employment here." "I'm happy to answer anything you need." "Excellent. How long have you been working at this estate?" 8 weeks? And in that time, how would you characterize your relationship with Ms. Harris?" The question was a trap. David could feel the weight of it, the way anything he said could be twisted into ammunition. "Professional. She hired me to maintain estate systems. I do that work to the best of my ability." "Just professional? You've never spent time with Ms. Harris outside of work hours?" "We've had conversations, sure. She's interested in how things work. I explain repairs when she asks." Kenneth smiled like a shark. "And these conversations, they happen frequently?" "Often enough. She owns the estate. She's allowed to know what I'm fixing." "Of course. But would you say Ms. Harris spends an unusual amount of time with you, more than she might with other contractors?" Rebecca's voice cut in, sharp. "Kenneth, where is this going?" "I'm establishing context for the board. Mr. Thompson is central to the concerns we're discussing." David felt anger building underneath his nerves. "I'm central to nothing. I fix broken systems. That's the extent of my involvement here." "Really?" "Because according to staff reports, Ms. Harris has been seen leaving your apartment building. She attended a museum outing with you and your daughter." That seems to exceed typical employer-employee interaction." The room went very quiet. David glanced at Rebecca, saw her jaw tighten, but her expression stayed controlled. "My daughter met Ms. Harris once. They got along well. I fail to see how that's relevant to running this company." "It's relevant because it demonstrates a pattern of personal entanglement that compromises professional judgment. Ms. Harris has been delegating critical meetings, declining strategic opportunities, spending time on personal matters when the company requires her focus." David's hands clenched under the table. "Ms. Harris runs a billion-dollar company successfully. How she allocates her personal time is none of your business. It becomes our business when her personal choices affect shareholder value." Rebecca stood. "Kenneth, enough. You've made your point. Mr. Thompson's presence here is unnecessary. On the contrary, I think the board deserves to hear directly from the man at the center of this situation. Mr. Thompson, did Miss Harris offer you this position because of your qualifications or because she was personally interested in you?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. David felt the trap closing, knew that defending Rebecca would sound like confirmation while denying interest would be lying to a room full of people who could detect dishonesty like bloodhounds. He stood, faced Kenneth directly. "Ms. Harris hired me because I fixed a critical security system in 2 minutes when your contracted experts wanted 3 days and $15,000. She hired me because I'm competent at my job. And yes, we've become friends. Adults are capable of friendship regardless of employment relationships. The fact that you find that threatening says more about your character than hers." Kenneth's expression hardened. "Friendship? Is that what we're calling it? Call it whatever you want. The facts are simple. Ms. Harris is the best CEO this company has ever had. Your quarterly earnings prove it. Your stock price proves it. The only thing being compromised here is your attempt to undermine her because you can't control her." "Mr. Thompson, I'm not finished. You tried to bribe me to leave. Sent a recruiter with an offer carefully designed to look irresistible. When I refused, you leaked stories to the press. Now you're trying to use my employment as evidence that Ms. Harris is unfit to lead. None of this is about her competence. It's about you wanting power you haven't earned." The room was dead silent. Kenneth's face had gone red. "That's a serious accusation." David pulled his phone out, brought up his text messages, turned the screen toward the board. "Here's your personal message offering to discuss financial opportunities. Here's the recruiting email from Harrison Webb at Summit Solutions, time-stamped 3 days after I declined your first approach. And here's the IP address that leaked the hospital photo to the gossip site, which I'm betting traces back to someone on your staff." He slid the phone across the table. A woman David didn't recognize picked it up, scrolled through the evidence, her expression darkening. "Kenneth, is this true? Did you attempt to bribe an employee?" Kenneth's composure cracked. "I offered alternative employment opportunities. That's not a bribe. You coordinated with a recruiting firm to remove someone you perceived as problematic. That's manipulation at minimum, possibly illegal depending on how the offer was structured." Another board member spoke up, older woman with sharp eyes. "And the leaked photograph? Can that be traced?" Rebecca placed a folder on the table. "My security team investigated. The photo was taken from a device registered to Kenneth's assistant. The upload came from an IP address that belongs to a public relations firm Kenneth has used before." Kenneth stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to sit here and be accused." "Sit down, Kenneth." The command came from the woman holding David's phone. She had the presence of someone used to being obeyed. Kenneth sat. "Rebecca, you've been CEO for 8 years. In that time, company value has tripled. Revenue is up 40%. Employee satisfaction is at record highs. Kenneth, you've been on this board for 2 years. In that time, you've opposed every major initiative Rebecca proposed, many of which turned out to be extremely profitable. You've attempted to install allies in key positions, pushed for acquisitions that served your interests rather than shareholder interests, and now you've orchestrated a harassment campaign against an employee. Did I miss anything?" The room stayed silent. Kenneth's expression had shifted from confident to cornered. The woman continued, "I've been reviewing the consulting contracts you pushed through last year. Donna Walker in finance flagged some irregularities. Care to explain why a firm you partially own received $800,000 for services that were never actually rendered?" Kenneth went pale. Those contracts were approved through proper channels. Channels you controlled. We're going to need a full audit, and in the meantime I'm calling for an immediate vote. All in favor of retaining Rebecca Harris as CEO, raise your hand. 11 hands went up. Kenneth stayed down. Motion carries. Rebecca remains CEO. Kenneth, you're suspended from board duties pending investigation into the consulting contracts. We'll be referring this to appropriate authorities. You can leave now. Kenneth stood, face twisted with rage and humiliation. He looked at David with undisguised hatred. This isn't over. David met his gaze without flinching. Yeah, it is. Kenneth left the room. The door closing behind him sounded like a verdict. The woman who'd run the vote turned to David. Mr. Thompson, thank you for your candor. You can return to your duties. David nodded, stood, walked to the door. Rebecca caught his eye as he passed, her expression carrying relief and something deeper. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition of courage she hadn't expected. He made it back to the north wing bathroom before his hands started shaking. Adrenaline crash hit hard, left him sitting on the floor trying to remember how to breathe normally. Clara appeared in the doorway. You just made an enemy for life. Pretty sure I already had one. Fair point, but you also might have saved Ms. Harris's job. She saved her own job, I just told the truth. In a room full of people who could have destroyed your career with a single phone call. That took courage. David didn't feel courageous. He felt exhausted and slightly nauseous, but he picked up his wrench and went back to work on pipes that needed fixing because work was something he understood. An hour later his phone buzzed. Rebecca. Emergency's over. Kenneth's being investigated for embezzlement. Board voted to keep me as CEO unanimously. You were incredible in there. I just told them what happened. You stood up to a room full of millionaires and called out corruption without flinching. That's not just telling the truth. That's having a spine. David smiled despite everything. So what happens now? Now I have about 8 hours of damage control calls to make. But tonight, if you're free, I'd like to take you and Emma to dinner. Actual dinner, nice restaurant, celebration of not getting fired. Emma has school tomorrow. Then we'll make it early, 5:30. I know a place that's family-friendly and makes the best pasta outside of Italy. David thought about Emma's drawing, about Sarah's message delivered 4 years late, about the fact that hiding hadn't protected them from exposure anyway. Yeah, 5:30 works. I'll pick you up. You don't have to. I want to. Let me do this. David agreed and spent the rest of the afternoon finishing plumbing repairs while trying not to think too hard about what dinner meant, about whether they were past the point of pretending this was just friendship, about whether he was ready for whatever came next. He picked up Emma from school at 3 and told her they were going to dinner with Miss Rebecca. She responded by demanding to wear her purple dress, the fancy one saved for special occasions. David didn't argue. Rebecca arrived at 5:30 in a car that was nice but not ostentatious, wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look human rather than corporate. Emma climbed into the back seat and immediately started explaining her volcano project in comprehensive detail. Rebecca listened like lava-to-vinegar ratios were genuinely fascinating. The restaurant was in a neighborhood David didn't usually frequent, the kind of place with white tablecloths and wine lists, but still welcoming to a 6-year-old in a purple dress. They got a corner table near the window. Emma ordered spaghetti and proceeded to cover herself in marinara sauce within 3 minutes. Rebecca watched with barely contained amusement. She's efficient. She's thorough. There's a difference. Emma looked up, sauce on her chin. What's efficient mean? Getting things done quickly and well. Then I'm super efficient at eating spaghetti. They laughed and it felt normal. Felt like the kind of moment that happened in regular families having regular dinners. David let himself sink into that normalcy, let the tension of the morning fade into background noise. After dinner they walked through the neighborhood, Emma between them, holding both their hands. Holiday lights had started appearing on buildings, early December decorations turning the streets festive. Emma pointed out her favorite displays, rendered judgments on decoration quality, asked if they could get lights for their apartment. We can get some for your room if you want. Can Miss Rebecca help us put them up? David glanced at Rebecca over Emma's head. She smiled. I'd love to help. I'm terrible at decorating, but I can follow directions." They walked Emma back to the car and drove home through evening traffic. Rebecca pulled up in front of David's building and put the car in park. "Thank you for tonight. I needed normal." "We all did." Emma unbuckled her seatbelt. "Can Miss Rebecca come upstairs? I want to show her my room." David looked at Rebecca. She nodded. They climbed the stairs to the second-floor apartment, Emma leading the way with boundless energy despite the late hour. David unlocked the door to their modest space, suddenly very aware of how small everything was, how worn the furniture, how the ceiling had water stains from the unit above. Rebecca stepped inside and looked around with genuine interest rather than judgment. "This is nice. It feels like a home." "It's not much, but it's ours." Emma grabbed Rebecca's hand and dragged her to the bedroom, showed her drawings covering the walls, explained the significance of each one. Rebecca listened with patient attention, asked questions, treated Emma's art like it mattered. David stood in the doorway watching them, this powerful woman who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar companies now sitting cross-legged on his daughter's floor, admiring crayon sketches of castles and dinosaurs. Something in his chest cracked open, some final wall he'd been maintaining against exactly this kind of vulnerability. After Emma's room tour, Rebecca helped with the bedtime routine like she'd done it before. Reading stories, getting water, negotiating for 5 more minutes of being awake. When Emma finally settled, she looked at both of them from her pillow. "Are you guys going to get married?" David nearly dropped the water glass. Rebecca didn't flinch. "Maybe someday. Would that be okay with you?" "Yeah. You're nice and you make my dad smile. Those are the important things." "What about your mom? Would she be okay with it?" Emma considered seriously. "Mom told me before she died that Dad would find someone else. She said that was good because love doesn't run out. So yeah, she'd be okay with it. She'd probably like you." Rebecca's eyes were bright with tears she was fighting to contain. "I would have liked to meet her." "She would have liked you too. She liked people who were honest." David's throat felt tight. Emma yawned and closed her eyes, asleep within minutes the way only children could manage. He and Rebecca stood and moved quietly out of the room, leaving the door cracked. In the kitchen, Rebecca finally let the tears fall. David handed her a tissue, didn't know what else to do with his hands. "I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting that." "Emma's full of surprises. She's incredible. You're raising an incredible human. I had help for the first 2 years. After that, it's just been me figuring it out as I go." Rebecca looked at him with those tired, guarded eyes that for once weren't guarded at all. "You asked me earlier what happens now. I think I have an answer." "Yeah?" "I'm going to step down as CEO." David felt the words land like impact. "What? Why? You just won. The board voted to keep you." "I won the battle. But I've been fighting battles for 8 years. Board challenges, investor demands, people questioning my age or my gender or my right to run the company my mother built. I'm tired of fighting. And today, watching Kenneth try to destroy us, watching him weaponize my personal life to undermine my professional credibility, I realized something." "What's that?" "I can rebuild a company. I can't rebuild lost time with people who matter. Emma matters. You matter. This matters." She gestured at the small kitchen, the apartment, the life David had built on limited resources and maximum effort. "I'm not abandoning the company. I'll move to board chair, oversee strategy, maintain control, but I'm promoting my COO to CEO. She's brilliant and ready, and she deserves the chance. And I'm going to actually live my life instead of just managing it." David processed that, tried to understand what she was offering. "You're doing this because of me?" "I'm doing this because of me. Because I almost lost everything that actually matters while protecting things that were never at risk. The company will be fine. Better than fine. But I only get one life, and I've spent too much of it proving myself to people who'll never be satisfied." She stepped closer, close enough that David could count her breaths. "I don't want this to be an act anymore. I don't want to hide or manage perception or calculate risk. I want to be with you and Emma. I want to help hang holiday lights and attend volcano science fairs and exist as a person instead of a position." David felt his heart hammering against his ribs. That's a big change. I know, and I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just being clear about where I am, what I want, who I want. The space between them felt charged with everything unsaid over the past months. David thought about Sarah, about the message Emma had carried for 4 years, about the fact that moving forward didn't mean forgetting where you'd been. Emma asked if you'd come to her science fair next Thursday. I already told her I'd be there. And if you step down as CEO, will you have time for her winter concert in 2 weeks? I'll make time. And when she wants you to help build her volcano, even though that means getting vinegar and baking soda all over your probably expensive clothes. Especially then, David smiled. Okay, then I'm in. We're in. Whatever this becomes, we figure it out together. Rebecca kissed him then, soft and careful, like she was afraid he might disappear if she pushed too hard. David kissed back and felt 4 years of careful emotional distance collapse into relief so profound it was almost painful. They pulled apart and Rebecca was crying again but smiling through it. I should go. It's late and Emma has school tomorrow. Yeah, you should. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Then Rebecca headed toward the door, paused with her hand on the knob. Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with Emma, for not running when things got complicated. Thank you for being worth the complication. She left, and David stood in his small kitchen listening to her footsteps fade down the stairs. He checked on Emma one more time, found her sleeping peacefully, drawing pad fallen to the floor. He picked it up and saw the latest sketch. 3 figures standing together outside a building with lights in the windows. 3 people smiling. A family. His phone buzzed. Rebecca. Just got home. Still thinking about that kiss. David typed back. Me too. See you tomorrow? Every day. He went to bed that night with his phone on the nightstand and Sarah's photograph on the dresser, and the sense that he'd finally figured out how to honor the past while building toward a future that looked nothing like he'd planned, but everything like what he needed. 8 months passed in a blur of ordinary miracles. Rebecca stepped down as CEO in January, moved to board chair, spent her newfound free time attending Emma's school events and helping with homework, and slowly integrating into the rhythms of David's life. The guest house cottage got renovated, bright and warm, a second home where Emma picked the paint colors and furniture placement with 6-year-old authority. In September, they adopted a dog from the rescue shelter, a mutt named Pepper, who divided her time between David's apartment and the guest house with easy adaptability. Emma declared her the best dog in the world within 3 hours of bringing her home. The scandal faded into background noise as Kenneth Moore's embezzlement trial made bigger headlines. Donna Walker ran the company with steady competence and quarterly earnings continued climbing. Rebecca still attended board meetings but spent most of her time on projects she actually cared about rather than corporate battles she'd fought too long. Emma's 7th birthday fell on a Saturday in late September. They threw a party at the guest house cottage, small gathering of school friends and neighbors. Rebecca helped organize games and served cake and fit into the chaos with practiced ease. After the other kids left and Emma was playing with Pepper in the yard, David and Rebecca sat on the porch watching the afternoon light turn golden. She asked me something yesterday. What's that? If I was going to be her mom now, not like replacing her real mom, but additional mom. David's chest tightened. What did you tell her? I told her I'd like that very much, if it was okay with her. She said it was definitely okay because her real mom would want her to have someone who could braid her hair properly, which apparently I'm better at than you. David laughed, despite the tears threatening. Sarah was terrible at braiding too. Emma's operating under the assumption that all women have secret hair braiding skills. I'll take whatever reasoning gets me included in her life. Emma ran up the porch steps, Pepper chasing behind. Can we plant more flowers tomorrow? The garden needs more colors. Rebecca smiled. Absolutely. You're the garden designer. We follow your vision. Good, because I have lots of visions. She ran back to playing, 7 years old and full of plans and completely secure in the knowledge that she had 2 parents who loved her even though one of them lived in heaven and the other had only been around for 8 months. David looked at Rebecca, this woman who'd walked away from corporate power to help a 6-year-old design gardens and braid hair, and build vinegar volcanoes. I love you. The words came out simple and true, no calculation or hedging. Rebecca's smile reached her eyes. I love you too, both of you, this whole chaotic, beautiful mess we've built. They sat there in the September sun, Pepper barking at something invisible, Emma directing the dog with supreme confidence, and David thought about the emergency call that had started everything. About broken security systems and hospital waiting rooms and board meetings where truth had mattered more than strategy. About the fact that sometimes the most important repairs were the ones you made to your own life, piece by piece, choice by choice, opening yourself to connection even when fear screamed for distance. Emma brought them a drawing she'd just finished, 3 figures and a dog standing in front of a cottage with flowers everywhere. In the corner, barely visible, a small portrait of a woman with angel wings watching over them all. This is us, all of us. Even Mommy gets to be in the picture because she's part of the family too. Rebecca took the drawing with careful hands like it was precious and breakable. Can I keep this? Yeah, but I need to sign it first. That's what real artists do. Emma signed her name in careful letters, handed the drawing back. Rebecca held it against her chest. David reached for her hand and Emma's hand, and they sat there together while the light faded and the evening settled, and Pepper finally tired herself out enough to collapse at their feet. A family built from loss and courage and the willingness to believe that second chances were real if you had the strength to reach for them. The security system had been fixed months ago, but everything else, all the important repairs, were still ongoing. Still choosing each other. Still building something real out of the ordinary materials of daily life and honest love, and the understanding that home wasn't a place or a building or even a person. Home was right here, in this moment, hands linked and hearts open, and a future stretching ahead full of science fairs and garden designs and all the beautiful, messy complications of a life well lived.